Hello, and you're very welcome. It's Eamonn O'Brien, and this is the Reluctant Speakers Club Expert Series. And I am delighted today to be joined by a pal. It is Conor Keppel. Conor, you're all the way from Forest Salon Software.
That's
did
it.
Did I get that right?
You got that right, yeah. Great
Okay.
to be here, thanks.
Delighted to have you. And we're talking today about one of the great challenges that people have as marketers or as promoters of businesses and ideas, and that is, what does it take to create more compelling and interesting content? So whether you're a speaker or indeed you need content for other forms of communication, how do you get at the good stuff? So Conor, you're somebody who has loads and loads of experiences in that realm. In fact, you and I share something in common. We're dyed-in-the-wool marketers, business-to-business bloggers, and so much more. So tell me about your approach to creating content. You can talk maybe about what you do now and maybe things that you've done in the past.
Sure. I suppose my approach to creating content all comes back to my philosophy on marketing. I think if you ask maybe 10 different marketers what marketing is, they'll probably give you a different definition. And for me, it's about embedding differentiation in the mind of your target public to generate demand. That's the way I would say it. Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, when it comes to content creation, it's about, I guess, getting the message of the company and so on. But the most important thing is to try and strike a bit of emotion. And particularly, I think one important emotion with our target audience, who's salon owners, but it's an important emotion in anyone, is the emotion of aspiration, okay? Or it's the whole aspirational thing.
Yeah,
okay?
what you'd like to do.
What you'd like to do, where you'd like to be. We recognize the challenges that you have faced, for example, okay? So I think a lot of content creators, unfortunately, they look at the product and they're like, it'll do this and it'll do that and so on, okay? And that content, while it might work to a certain level, it can be a bit stale. So I think like when we're creating content, I love to look at success stories, not to look internally and say we're the best salon software company in the world and yada yada. And while I firmly believe that, I like to look at some of the salons and what they've achieved and tell stories, for instance, about Mary in Beauty Essence in London, who worked on the floor of a salon, now has 3 salons, or to talk about people like that and create stories.
And tell me, success stories and what have you, do you find that they're a great source for the types of content that you produce? And do people react well to it?
They do, I think. I think for us, I suppose, our audience is maybe not as... They're not techies, okay? And we're a techie company. So the last thing we want to do is going out and tell them about this wonderful machinery we have and all the bytes and megabits and cloud and all this kind of thing. So it really does work because there's a human interaction to it. They see somebody who they can just be like too, and this person has done it. So if you go out and you say, for instance, that a person has created a wonderful salon, they've increased turnover, and here's how they've done it, and then that person will feel like, oh, I can do that too. It's not impossible. It's not, it's not something you just read about and these people that...
Yeah, and tell me, do you include then technical stuff in what you're talking about, or do you kind of give that a lesser position because maybe it doesn't require the same lead?
Yeah, we give it a lesser position. I mean, the only time we ever talk about technology is what it can do for your business. Okay, we never talk about technology in the context of just technology.
That's a splendid idea.
Yes. So I mean, we'll talk about things like you can market your salon through social media with our software, but why? Because it'll help you get younger clients. It'll help you generate referrals, or what we call word of mouth. So that kind of thing. So we never talk about technology in the context of just technology,
Yeah. How much research do you find you have to do to kind of find good ideas?
A great place to start if you're looking to do research is with your sales team. Okay, because they're out talking face to face.
Why is that?
Every day. Well, they're out there every day talking to them. And I know in the company, for instance, we have a great sales team and they all come from industry. Okay, so they've all either been a salon owner or a therapist, and they have great contacts and they're out there talking about the software peer to peer. So I would take a lot of stories, a lot of messages back from them, because I'd have these wonderful ideas, I think, and they just might not float, float at a message level. They might not strike any particular kind of want or need or desire or anything. So that's a great place, I think, to start.
So your sales
research.
folks will be one source. Where else would you look now for ideas? What works?
Interestingly enough, in the context of research, I think it's changed drastically in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
There's so many tools out there now where you can do the research yourself. Okay, so previously, like rather than going around maybe doing focus groups, that kind of thing, I'm not personally a huge fan of focus groups. And I very much come from, the whole Henry Ford story where he said if he asked people what they want, he would have built a faster horse.
Yes, I've heard that
so,
one. Yes.
Yeah, so
I saw it during this week. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little bit like that. I mean, what we very often do in the marketing team is we sit down, we come up with some maybe great stories about existing salon owners, we come up with some interesting stuff about customer complaints, that kind of thing. And what we'll do is we'll take a small section of an email list, we'll send them 2 or 3 different titles to a blog post, for instance.
Yeah.
And we'll just measure which one got the most clicks. And
So
very
you're
often,
testing.
so we're testing. So
Yeah.
like research is great, but very often if you're doing face-to-face research, sometimes you're only going to get something that your competition could get. You're only
Yeah.
going to get something that's not really got true differentiation.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if you can sit down with really creative people, really understand your brand, really understand your target audience, come up with a great story, and then test it. Don't sit in saying I think or I feel or test it.
And I like that, because I think that's exactly right. You can have any number of ideas, and research will help show you what won't work. Exactly what
Yeah.
people say, well, I wouldn't do that. But you ultimately still have to have the acid test of getting in front of real live people.
Sure.
And getting their reactions.
Yeah.
Because they will tell you, they will vote with their feet, with their attention spans,
Yes.
with everything else in terms of what they gravitate towards. And tell me, in terms of advice that you might give to people who are maybe starting out and trying to create content, like, for example, when you're creating your content for your talks, and you would do quite a few talks on behalf of Forest, what advice would you give to people about really making sure the content that they create is more interesting and more engaging?
In the context of a talk, I think the simple biggest mistake people make is they don't tell a story.
Yeah.
They do a presentation. I don't do presentations. I try to tell a story.
Yeah.
So we do something called what we call retention marketing in Forest, right? And it sounds terribly boring, but it's basically the fastest way to grow your salon is not by chasing new clients. It's by focusing on your existing ones and generating referrals, right?
We call that dancing with the girl you brought. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. So in the context of a presentation, you could go on and talk about techniques and methods, and which I do, but I tell the story of 2 salon owners.
Yes.
So I get up and I talk about Lisa and Mary.
Yes.
And I'll say both are trained therapists, both opened this, they worked in the same salon, and they went on to start 2 salons in the same city. And I said there's one difference. Lisa thinks that if new clients are coming through the door, her salon must be growing, whereas Mary focuses on her existing clients. And then I ask which salon do you think grew faster, is now more successful? And everyone's like, oh, the one chasing new clients, of course, because they're getting new clients through the door.
Yes.
And then I turn around and say no, and I tell the story of Lisa and Mary, and then we talk about retention marketing vicariously almost through the 2 people. So
Yes.
that's a difference. Whereas a lot of people, I think, get up, and at the start as well, I got up and I was talking about these amazing features, and here's what we'll do. We'll grow your business by 100%, and we'll do all this, but you have to tell a story.
And let's stop there, because so there's an example of a story which can work very well when you're in front of an audience. But now here's the question, because I'm not really asking you so much about speaking, since we get into that, but it's more about how and where that story can be extended now into other forms of communication. Do you find that you have to do something different, or can you use similar materials? What's the balance?
Online, is it?
Online, yeah.
You can use similar materials. I think the premise of your message in terms of, okay, it's Forest, it's a story, it's about maybe retention marketing. Say if that's the campaign. Yes, you can use similar stuff, but a big mistake a lot of people make is, oh, if this works on Twitter, it'll work on Facebook, it'll work as a blog post, it'll work as this. And, Gary Vaynerchuk, the famous Gary Vaynerchuk, always talks about it's like learning Finnish and then expecting to go into Sweden and for people to understand you. So you have to take something.
That's a good analogy. I'll remember that one.
You have to take every platform is different. Okay, so Twitter is instant and it's interactive. So it's just like a really catchy statement with a link, for instance, that might link to your blog post. Or more importantly, it's about listening, using search.twitter.com, seeing what conversations are going on around it, interacting with those people, but also seeing how they're speaking about it. And then using that language.
I love it, because it's adapting, but basing what you're doing on conversations that people are having.
That are already having. Exactly. Yeah. So it might be a conversation around, oh, it's impossible to get people back into my salon because of this.
Yeah.
So then what you do is you write a blog post going, how to break the barrier of, or, it's not impossible.
Yes.
Here's how to do it. So something like that addresses the question. That's it. So again, in Facebook, in terms of it's more visual and different platforms, but one of the biggest mistakes is people just come on and think the same thing will work on every platform, and every platform is different.
And you're absolutely right, and it doesn't, yeah. Well, I knew we were going to have a great chat today, Conor, and maybe we close out with kind of an interesting one. At least I hope you'll find it interesting. If you were to take you today, and you were to think about all the things that you've learned over the years, if there was one thing that you know now that you wish you'd known when you were younger, what would it be when it comes to great content?
I'd probably say don't get into marketing and become an accountant, but or a software developer.
That's your mother speaking. Yeah. Go
on. I think I've learned many things. I suppose it's hard to sum it into one.
Yeah.
I think one mistake that I've probably made as a marketer is, a lot of people talk about research, and we were talking about research earlier. Sometimes you just have to trust your gut, and you have to go with something that's completely unique and different. And the biggest mistake I made for the first few years was, here's how our competitors are doing it. And even though you don't consciously end up saying the same thing as them, if you absorb too much information, if you become too tied into what they're doing, you actually end up basically turning your message into the same. It might be slightly different, you know?
Yes.
The second thing I learned as well is to resist the temptation to be too salesy from day one. People don't want to interact with that, you know.
No.
So the greatest, I think, learning that I would say to somebody starting out really is trust your gut.
Yes.
Try to do something completely different.
Yeah.
You know, don't be afraid of failure. And in this day and age, test it. There's no excuse for failure this day and age. Just take a small segment of your list, do a presentation, whatever it is, and see the reaction.
Yeah.
And then roll it out on a bigger basis based upon that. But just like I said, don't roll it out the same way in every platform.
And can I tell you that I think that's especially true when it comes to things online?
Yes. Yeah, very much. Yeah, very much.
Yeah, good. Well, look, I knew it was going to be a great chat, so thank you indeed for coming in, Conor.
Yeah,
so delighted to have it. And you've been listening to Eamonn O'Brien, and this is the Reluctant Speakers Club Expert Series. And until the next time, thank you for listening.